G'day guys and gals, and this is Fireball, and welcome to a very short and simple episode on the DCS module, the KA50 Black Shark 2. In today's instructional video, we're going to be going through very simple things to do with the Black Shark and hopefully make your life a bit easier. We're going to be looking at the controls we need to do to take off, to maneuver, and to land. So with no further ado, let's see how it goes. Okay guys, so here we are. We are in the cold start of the KA50 and there's a few things we need to do before we start getting ready to take off. We need to make sure our controls are set. So we're going to hit the escape key. We're going to go into adjust controls. In the adjust controls in the top left corner it says KA50 Sim. If it says something different, make sure it says KA50 Sim. And then once we've done that, we want to go to access commands. We're going to be looking at these for access here. So that is our flight control rudder. So for me it's my twist, but you may have pedals. The cyclic roll, which is left and right, that's your joystick. I'm just going to call it joystick from this point. The cyclic pitch, that's forward and backwards. And then the collective. Now the collective is the part, the instrumentation and the equipment on your left that you use to increase and decrease your altitude. I will be using the HOTAS throttle. It's bound to my throttle, but it is not the actual throttle of the aircraft. So let's just go to the next point. So if we click on search, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that there's certain things here that we have ready to go. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that you can find your trimmer. So if we type in trim under the search feature, you're going to see 4 options, and the 2 we're interested in is joystick button 10 for trimmer reset. That's usually not anything you worry about, but for some reason if your trimmer gets out of alignment and you just can't control it, you may want to reset the trim. Usually I wouldn't do this unless you're on the ground. The trimmer is the system that we will be using to program and talk to the flight computer. And the other thing we're going to be doing is the autopilot. And you can see here we've got autopilot heading hold set as button number 7. And the reason for that is, and I'll go through it in just a minute, is that way we don't have to look down to determine where we want the aircraft to be. We can just push a button and that'll help us a lot. Okay, so now we've got that out of the way. We're pretty much ready, and you can see here, if you haven't done so already, you're not familiar with this aircraft before, definitely use the auto start. Although some people see it as cheating, it allows you not to have to worry about which buttons in which order, and then you've got to wait for a moment before you do the next engine. It's quite a complicated system. You can just go left, win, and home, and start the auto start. And you can see here 3 minutes. So we're just going to cut away, and we're going to come back in a minute, and once this is all good to go, we'll continue the lesson. The aircraft has started. There's a couple of things we're going to quickly touch on before we take off. First of all, the PVR 800 is down here. We're not going to worry about that today. If you are not using the cold start and you see a bunch of these numbers, just hit the waypoint button, which is this button here, waypoint, so the top left button, and that'll turn them off. So we don't want any of these numbers here for this particular lesson. And also this is the ABRIS, okay, and so we can use the ABRIS to look at the map and to get different data information. We're not going to cover that today, but it's good to know. And so if I hold down the 0 key on my number pad, I can bring up this menu, this screen. If I push the 2, you can kind of bring up this screen, and you can still move things around. So you can see here nav, map, I can click these buttons, and that's the ABRIS. Okay, and this here, this is Scaval, this is for targeting. So this is your targeting system. Again, we're not going to do anything with that today. The other important thing here we're going to look at is one of the most important pieces of equipment that you're going to be using, this dial here. This is telling us our climb and descent. So this is telling us about our altitude change. So if we are climbing, it's going to be 5 meters a second, 10 meters, and if we're descending, now the thing about this is you do not want to move, you don't want to descend more than 5 meters a second. You can, but it's touch and go, and if you do more than 5, you hit your vortex, and that'll make the vehicle very hard to control. So we're pretty much ready to take off. One thing I didn't cover, which we'll just quickly go into, is under controls. If you do a search and type in hover, set a button for auto hover. That's going to help you later on as well. So we set some buttons before, and what we're going to do is we're getting ready to take off, but I'm just going to quickly go through the autopilot system. So the way the Black Shark 2 works is it's fly-by-wire. You pretty much just talk to the autopilot. When you use the trimmer, it'll set these 4 autopilot systems and tell the computer how you want the aircraft to fly. So if we have a look at these buttons, right now 3 are on and 1 is off. So we got bank hold. This one here is pitch hold. So obviously bank is left and right, pitch is up and down, as in pointing the aircraft forward or backwards, not the direction you're going. You got heading hold, and then altitude hold. So if it's lit up like altitude hold, that's off, that's on. So it's backwards what you'd normally expect. The next thing we need to do before we take off, we need to right control and enter, and then you're going to see the bottom left corner, you're going to see the input director. This input director here is telling us information about our aircraft. So if I use my rudders, you can see down here this line's moving. If I bring my this is my throttle here, so if I bring my throttle up, you can see that is moving, and that's allowing us to decrease and increase our altitude. That is actually our throttle there, but this is bound to my HOTAS throttle. And then you can see the diamond or the carrot in the center. As I move my joystick up and down, left and right, you can see what that is. So the first thing we're going to do to have a vertical takeoff is we want to bring this diamond about 1 centimeter above the cross there, so about there, and then hold down the trim button and release, and then release the joystick. And what you can see now is that's holding that there. So if I reset my trim, you're going to see this pop back and you'll see the joystick here move. So resetting trim, and it returned. Hold down the trim button, push forward and release. You can just push the trim button, but my recommendation is when you're going to use the trim and program the computer, always hold down the trim button, put the aircraft in where you want it to be, and then once it's ready and it's steady and stable, release the trim button. The other thing is, if any of these are turned off, what is turned off will not be programmed by the trimmer. So right now everything is on except for altitude hold. So what we're going to do now is we're getting ready to take off. Before we take off, we've got one more thing to quickly look at. And if you have a look at our aircraft here, it may be hard to see in the day, but you can see I've got a red light on my left, a green light on my right, and a spinning beacon underneath. If we want to turn those off, the lights on the stub of the wings are controlled for up here. You got 10%, 30%, and 100%, and off. So that should be off now. If I go back to F2, you can see the lights on the stub wings off, but the beacon's still on. And the beacon is actually located over here. So if you see this cover here with the orange and black striping, you got another cover here. This is for a weapon system, and then this one here by itself, this is what they call the anti-collision light, or also you can see here it says beacon. We'll turn that off. And now if I go here, the beacon's off. In the daytime it's not such a big thing, but at nighttime you're going to appreciate it. So just remember, the most important thing before we take off is set your trim to about 1 centimeter or so above this cross, because then it's going to allow us to take off. So then what we need to do, remembering this section here is my throttle, we're going to increase it to 75%, not super slow but not extremely fast, and just a gentle speed. So we're going to go up like that to 75, and there we go, we're taking off. Now one thing, if we look at the HUD, you can see, and I can zoom in with my HUD, let's just do my altitude hold. So let's bring down my, let's steady the aircraft. So I'm watching this gauge here as I adjust my throttle. We get to about there with 0, and then we click altitude hold, and whatever the altitude was, which right now it's 90, when we pushed it, it's going to try and maintain that altitude. So let's look at the HUD. Now if I use the star or the asterisk key on my keypad, I can zoom in and out. This is very useful. And so here we are on our HUD. Now there's a bit really useful information here that we're seeing. first of all, we're saying this is our altitude here. We're at 91 meters. This is our speed. We're going at 26 meters per hour. Okay. Oh, sorry, 26 kilometers per hour, now 25. This line here, this is our movement. So what it's saying is we're actually moving forwards and slightly to the right. So if I was to lean to the right, you'll see that this will move more to the right, and when I release, we're drifting. If I was to move to the left, you can see we're now moving to the left and we're drifting a little bit to the left, and that's going to steady to straight. If I was to pull back, this is showing that now we're slowing down, and that's also represented by this speed here. And so that's going to come into a really important point when we are getting ready to go hover, because when we're hovering, we want to take that and centralize it as much so there's no line. And so obviously what you'll do to hover is you'll take that line and whatever you see there, so right now it's forward and to the right, we will go back and to the left. So we'll go back and to the left, and then when it's steady like straight, then that means we're going dead forward. We'll keep going back, and then we can enter a hover. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is zoom out a little bit, is if you haven't set the heading hold on your joystick, you can push this button and reset it, but I'm going to show you something really quick. If I change my heading right now, did you see that diamond, that pip up here? Let me just zoom back in. This diamond is showing us where the computer is wanting to go. So we've told the computer at this point, go in this direction, and while heading hold is turned on, it will always try and point us in that direction. If I zoom out and I turn off heading hold, now it's not enabled. You can see already the aircraft starting to drift. And the beauty about this also is I've actually got a button on my joystick for that. So if I push my button on my joystick, it's on, off, on, off. And every time I do on and off on my joystick, it's actually resetting it to that new location. So if I go to return and I turn it off, I go to the location I want to be at. So let's spin it around, and let's say we want to go this direction here, and there, we want to be there. Turn it on, you can see it's now reset that diamond to where we want to be. And now what we can do is we can go forwards, gain some speed, and if you like where you're at, once you're at that point, hold down your trim, get to where you want, release the trim, and then release your controls on the aircraft, and now it's flying in that direction. If you want to use your rudder, you can spin it around a little bit, turn your heading hold off, heading hold on, and you're good to go, and it will update that. Once we're ready, we're going to want to actually land. So my recommendation on landing, to make it as simple as possible, is have a gentle conversation with the flight computer, and we want to start slowing down. So slow down, you want to pull back, and also if we have a look here, you're going to see that there's no line right now. The line won't appear until you're 50 kilometers an hour or less. So let's pull back and hold down the trimmer, okay, and release, and we want to keep it fairly around 10 degrees or so. Hold down the trimmer and release, and there you can see that line's coming back again. So let me zoom in. So now you can see that line is a little bit to the left and forwards. We want to try and get that number, that speed variable, to 0 if we can, but 3 is good. So now we're going backwards, so we want to push forwards until we can get that in. And the other thing you want to do before you go into your hover is you want to try and keep this here at 0. So right now we're below 0. There's 10, there's negative 10, so that's actually 0 right there. You can see we're gaining speed again. So what we want to do is we want to basically decrease speed. Once you're getting close, hold down your trimmer, so that way you're not fighting the computer. Hold down the trimmer and just use your joystick to work out where you want to be, and we want to keep it straight. So if we're going to the left, we want to go to the right a little bit. There we go, and we get to about there, get to about 3 or 4, release, and then hit your button for hover. And so what's going to happen now is it's going to settle it back down, and if you have a look up here, it says auto hover. Now the other thing is right now we don't have our altitude hold on, and I know that because it's not showing up here. So if I come back down here, well, there we go, it's not showing it for some reason. It should normally show in here if you have altitude hold. So I'm not sure why that's not showing it there. Anyway, so now we're at a steady hover, and we can look to the left, we can look to the right, and we can pretty much see that we're at a gentle hover. And so now what we can do is we can start descending. So if we take our altitude hold off, if it's already on, we'll take it off like that. We can start our descent. Keep an eye on this gauge here, and then you'll be able to see how quickly you're descending. You don't want to descend more than 5 meters per second. If we hit F2, you can see, we're looking around the F2, what's around us right now. It's just grass. And so you want to try and keep your descent around 2 or 3 meters a second is perfect. And so what we're watching here is our altitude, here is our speed. Speed is pretty much perfect. Here is our descent rate. And so let's just increase our throttle a little bit. Slow our descent down. There we go. And we are set. So we're about to land, and we have landed, and once you've landed, just pull the throttle completely off. There we go, perfect. And we just landed. So if we go to outside view, there we go, we've landed. Now one more thing to take note is if you look down here, see how all these are flashing? If we were to take off again, watch what happens. These are all flashing, and they're off. Actually, they're all on right now. No, they are off. So if we turn these back on, then we've got control of the aircraft with the flight computer. So what that means is when they're off, it's going to be really squirrely. So just make sure that if you got to take off again, that these are always switched on, because they're going to be very useful. We're also in a hover right now, so the aircraft is trying to maintain a hover. So what we're going to do is we're going to slow it back down again, our rate of ascent, because we're not using our altitude control, remember. And we're also going to take the hover off, and so then we're able to be in control of the aircraft properly. So all we did is we basically went into a hover. Let's rotate the aircraft a little bit, remove the aircraft around, there we go, like this. Set our location where we want to be forward, use the trimmer, hold the trimmer button in so we can slow ourselves down using that line. As you can see, now we're going backwards, so we're push forward so we get to about 3 or 4. There we go, and release, and hit the hover button and give it a second to settle down. And that little square that you just saw appear here, let me zoom in so you can see it a bit better. That little square right there, the more center you can get it, the better you're going to be at. The other thing to notice, that if you're in a hover mode, you want to try and make sure that this pip here isn't to the left or the right. You want it dead center, but along here, okay? So you don't want it off that side or off that side, you want it dead center. And that means that when you're hovering, you're not going to drift. And once you've got that hover in, then what we can do is we can turn off the altitude hold, which is here. Now there should actually be a light that says altitude hold here. I'm not sure why it's not lighting up in this particular model right now. And then we can start decelerating. So right now you can see here our climb is going. We want to keep an eye on this, and we want to make sure we stay above -5. So if we go into 5 meters per second or lower, we're going to hit our vortex. So there is our altitude here. Okay, so on the HUD, there's our altitude right there. And you can also see, looks like your altitude is here as well. Altimeter is right there. And then this is the rate of descent right now. So if I was to go further down, beyond 5, it'd probably start screaming at us. There you go, so shaking, that's bad. So what we need to do is increase pressure to get the descent above that, because what that means is we're in our vortex and we don't have enough lift to support the weight of the helicopter. So you want to keep it between 0 and 5, and if you can't get out of the vortex, you may need to pitch forward and get some air, some fresh air in front of you. Okay, and then once we've done that, keeping it above 5, you can see here we're starting to land. You can also hit F2 if you want, Make sure that there's nothing around you. There we go. And we're getting ready to land. And it's really that simple. It'll take some practice, it'll take some time. The auto hover is really important to use. You'll get used to these very quickly. And just remember, if it's lit up like this, it means it's switched off. Okay, so here is we're descending still. Let's go a little bit quicker. Let's try and get it around 5 meters per second descent, so we can get under about 40 meters. There we go. So that little tone, that just means you hit the 100-meter mark. So that's just a warning. If you're flying ahead of that tone, you know you've dropped under 100 meters. Beautiful. Let's reduce our descent here. There we go. If we go for an outside view, and once you descend it all the way and it hits the ground, pull your throttle all the way back, and that's it. That's all you need to do. So I hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions, let me know.